All right, guys, let's get with it right here. We got some breaking news, and before I really get into this, it won't be very long here. I want to let you guys know we are actually uploading our first video for Patreon. It's kind of a pilot video there. It does contain information that I'm sharing with you on this here, but as well, I will be going much deeper. I think we're going to be doing about a weekly broadcast on Patreon. And keep in mind, again, this for us is an alternative platform, just like live stream is. And we are trying to get our live stream back up and running, but we are running into one technical issue that we're trying to resolve now, to where we can run two different bandwidths at the same time on two different internet platforms that would allow us to get live stream to go uninterrupted. And so if you decide you want to go to Patreon, there's only two things I can say to you. One, don't worry about the pledge amount. If you want to do just $1, that's fine with us. We don't care about so much the amount. It's the fact that we want to have a platform that, from what we have been told, a lot of patriots in America that get kicked off of YouTube are able to go there and express things without that fear. So that's what we're going there for. Is for that purpose there. So once a week, at least, we'll be there, sometimes twice a week, to share those insights with you. And many of those will actually come out here on YouTube as well, but maybe there's going to be some issues that I'll discuss that I would not say here for the concern about being shut down. So if they shut down Patreon, all right, then we'll have to go for another idea altogether. So that's what we're hoping. If that's really the case, we'll find out. And so we'll just see. So we actually are processing that first video right now. We'll be uploading it in a little bit. It is Israeli News Live still, the same we are now. There's no change as far as our name. And I think even today's show will kind of bless you. You are going to get the gist of today's show here, but there's some things that I've said there that I probably would not say here. Nothing major as of yet, because our prior cast there that will be really thought out more in depth and detail during the week before we actually air there, and recapping, but going into issues that I won't take a chance to say here. All right, let's get right into it right now. Of course, the entire title of this program is the Turkish government, their plot with NATO in this whole issue in the Middle East. You know, I've said from the beginning that Erdogan only staged this coup to trick Russia in becoming their ally to get their troops inside of Syria. You guys know it. I've said it a million times that they were doing this in order to be able to be a part of an attack on Damascus, to overthrow Damascus in the near future. So this has been planned for a long time. They've been going along with it. And we brought out to you some news earlier today or yesterday about how there have been, in a recent attempt to take Damascus, that the coup was called, the overthrow was called off. Supposed to be an air attack followed by a ground attack. It was called off in the process because of the heavy bombardment by Russia and Syria. There were allegedly hundreds of Americans that were killed, British and also contract NATO fighters as well that were fighting in this battle, that they were planning on using this to launch the ground war against Damascus. Now, I bring this out because there's a couple of reasons. One, not so much with Erdogan meeting with the Pope Francis, although his meeting is about Jerusalem. Keep that in mind. That's what we're going to get into, is because this breaking news here that happened about 4 hours ago, the Times of Israel reporting the Saudi king slams Trump for transferring U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. What do you know? All of them angry over Jerusalem. Now, I know that there's many good independent news groups out there that have been talking about Jerusalem, the cup of trembling, a burdensome stone. We're aware of that. We'll quickly just jump over that. One of the prophecies in Zechariah, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will make Jerusalem a stone of burden for all the peoples. All that burden themselves with it shall be sore wounded, and all the nations of the earth shall be gathered together against it. All right? So we know that that was going to happen. But this renewed interest in Jerusalem with the Saudi king, he's there at the Arab League summit, And the first thing he hits is he slams Trump over Jerusalem. And these guys are working together to do what? Topple Bashar al-Assad. And, I've been saying all along, let me put it this way. I went back a little while back. I made the comment, when we look at the prophecy here in Zechariah, that all the nations would be gathered together against Israel. I said, well, all the nations are already there. And technically, if you want to say they're in Israel, gathered together against Israel, when you go into certain parts of Jordan, you're in ancient biblical Israeli territory. But the real issue is Jerusalem becomes that sticking point. And when President Trump, back in December last year, says that he's going to declare Jerusalem the capital of Israel, that kind of really seemed to get the ball going. Not only did he say it, then we ended up having the Chinese president coming out and saying East Jerusalem is a Palestinian capital. Well, really and truly, President Trump didn't say much different either, because when his leaked plan came out, we find out that President Trump did what? He stood on the side, the Vatican's agenda, which was giving the old city to the Vatican and giving Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, to the Israelis. And he said they could negotiate out the rest. But then Turkey says, no, East Jerusalem belongs to the Palestinians. And I'm thinking, oh, you guys are puppeting what the Vatican says. But I think where the problem comes in, although Prime Minister Netanyahu has been just as heavily involved in this war in Syria, I think he's not willing to give up Jerusalem completely. And this is why the Pope of Rome and Erdogan have been siding together for a battle for Jerusalem. And it could be not so much that Netanyahu's a good guy in this case, but it could be because there's some very serious religious Jews over there that really want to see the coming of the Mashiach. They want to see the Messiah. And they're not willing to walk away from Jerusalem. They know this is where the Messiah is to come. They're not going to go away willingly. All right? So that's where this whole problem is coming in. Now, I'm going to get back to Turkey in just a moment, because I said, what's Turkey's plot in this? We're going to find out. I hope you like it. If you do, thumbs up the thing. I'm getting into this thumbs up thing. One brother put a comment in there and says, thumb down helps you as well, but I don't want the thumb down. So, but anyway, God bless you guys. Remember Nathan? I know there's a lot of believers that don't like Nathan. And they really criticize this young man because he talks about the mitzvot, doing good works, and Christians know that it is not something by works, but it is the mercy of Yeshua that brings about the salvation. It's a gift of God. I agree with you on that. I know that. But we also know James taught faith without works is dead. Okay, so there's two sides of that. But you got to remember, Nathan, okay, somebody put a question mark in there. Nathan is the Jewish boy that had a near-death experience in Israel a couple of years back, and he was not a religious young man. He was brought in by the rabbis after his near-death experience, and he spoke about what he saw. Nathan claimed that there was coming a major war here in the Middle East. He talked about millions would die in Israel. He talked about how that Obama was Gog. Now as I watched the situation unfold in the interview where the rabbi interviews this young man, I realized his opinions and what he saw are two different things. If you really watch close, they are two different things. He has an opinion, and then there's a side where he is actually saying what he actually saw. But in his near-death experience, he comes back and he says that there's coming a war. It's going to start in the Middle East. Now, at the time that he has this, there's already the quote-unquote civil war in Syria. But he says all the nations are going to come against Jerusalem. And this is what he says in here. That's the part I wanted to bring out. He said it all begins with Jerusalem. He said every nation is going to want Jerusalem. He said they're not even going to care about the Israelis. They just want Jerusalem. That's why I wanted to bring this point up. He does go into the fact that there will be a limited nuclear war. And So I think it's relevant in the response that he talks about Jerusalem, just like the prophets in Zechariah, those that burden themselves with Jerusalem. In his case, he actually tells us that Jerusalem is the starting point of what this war would evolve into. And I know there's a lot of debate as to whether or not who God really is. I personally believe that Gog of Magog, if you look at it from a geographic point of view, it deals with Turkey and under those ancient times, those countries that were under the Turkish government. Now, do I believe that Erdogan is Gog? No, I don't. I believe that it is part of a NATO alliance, in my opinion. And I've had enough evidence proved it. We've had Dr. Steve Pigeon on here, who's very knowledgeable on this. And as well, I haven't had him on here, but there's an archaeologist that also was able to prove that Gog has nothing to do with Russia. Anyway, this isn't the time to get into that issue. But the point is there is a war coming. And right now, we have seen that there was, according to, and I will say alleged, according to, let me see if I can pull that up here. Here we go, right here. This was on the Hal Turner radio show. And I don't know Hal Turner. I don't know him personally. I've never listened to him before. But Hal Turner brought out the 200 American troops that were killed in Syria, along with 1,800 more PMCs, private military contractors, that were killed as well in these recent attacks back in March. It makes sense. And I was on Hebrew Nation Radio today, and I spoke in detail on that program there with Bonnie Harvey, that the reason why I can believe this could be true is because of what happened in 2016 in September, when the attack happened on Deir ez-Zor, where 80 people were killed, 69 were Syrian soldiers, 11 were Russian, but Russia never admitted to it. Russia retaliated. Aleppo became the hot box. Russia used a bunker buster. In that bunker buster, they destroyed the command center that was being used by the U.S., Saudi, Mossad, CIA, MI6. There was one British intelligence officer there. There were Saudis, Qatarians, Turkish, and Jordanian, all working in there, coordinating the effort of all these groups that are fighting al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, etc., ISIS, etc., inside of Syria to overthrow the government. Now, we broke the story. We broke also the story in Deir ez-Zor. We broke the story where U.S. just this year killed the 200 Russian soldiers. We were calling them contractors at the time. We only knew it was about a dozen. It wasn't until Mike Pompeo that actually comes out publicly now and says, no, it was 200 Russians that were killed. So the war is turning from a proxy war into a direct confrontation now. And this could be why the U.S. was more limited in their strike in Syria, for fear, if it is really true, that according to this article right here, that there are captured U.S. and British forces inside of from eastern Ghouta, maybe one reason why they did not do a heavier bombardment, for fear of the loss of life of their soldiers there. And you have to understand something, all right? And I know there's a lot of different opinions on our channel here, you know, but even like in the case of Deir ez-Zor this year, where U.S. troops were retaliating against this Russian and pro-Syrian advance, I am for American soldiers, protecting American soldiers' lives. Okay, you know, I don't agree with my country being in Syria. I don't. I just say it flat out. But I don't want to see American soldiers die either, because, you know, they're under command and they don't have much choice once they signed up. They're just stuck there now. All right. But I am seeing a major move to take Damascus. And from what this whole article here was about, quoting from Russian news, they were getting ready to use the staged chemical weapons attack to launch an air attack on Damascus and take down Russian S-300, S-400 systems in the region so they could begin a ground invasion. But it was all, they had to back off because the Russian and Syrian bombardment was so heavy on East Ghouta that it compromised the men that they had on the ground there. And this is what made a lot of this begin to change. They still faked, the White Helmet still was able to get this video made. Whether or not they really gassed anybody or not, I still don't know the answer to that. I don't think they did from what we're seeing, but it's not to say that somebody didn't actually die in that, or was it all staged? Russia says it was staged, all right? And it looks like to me it was staged from what we're hearing, the different evidence that's coming out about it now. The U.S. is saying that it's not, that it really happened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But where does Turkey play a role in this? Well, this is what really got me. And I figured out today something that really slipped past me from the beginning. Sorry about the noise in the background. I do have a rabbit in here, and he is intent on eating the paper off the windows. Anyway, so when I was looking at the situation here of this Greek fighter jet that crashed after an encounter with Turkish air crash, according to the officials there, and I've been watching the escalation. This was on the New York Times. This was on April the 12th when this happened here. And I have been watching the steady escalation between Turkey and Greece. And I hadn't put it together as of yet. Why? Now I know why. How many of you guys remember as the Greek economy began to collapse and the European Union kind of throws the Greeks out? Who picked up the ball with the Greeks to help them out? President Putin. He came to their aid. He has offered to help them in many different ways. All right. They have the S-300 missile defense shield. And Greece has not been on the best terms in the world with NATO. Not that they're going to try to go to war against NATO, but there is a danger that an escalation of war in the Middle East, that Greece might decide to side with Russia and begin to take down NATO planes overhead. And then also came the other issue. Why did Turkey launch an attack on the Kurds in Afrin? Again, exact same reason. This is why President Trump did not come to the aid of the Kurds in Afrin. There is a danger the Kurds could side with the Syrian government. After all, the Syrians and the Kurds were negotiating to join forces together. So President Trump, though he was over in Mumbai, pretending like he's there to protect the Kurds over there, he allowed the Kurdish forces to come in there and obliterate the Kurds. Excuse me, the Turkish forces come in there and obliterate the Kurds. Why? To move his forces, to get the one problem out of the way so he could do a rapid advance on Damascus. And the only ones really standing in the way are the Kurds. And it wouldn't look right for NATO to come in there and bomb the Kurds, would it? Make more sense now? See, if NATO is going to launch an attack on Damascus, NATO bombing Syrian or even Russian forces that would stand in the way to take down Damascus and overthrow Bashar al-Assad is nothing that would be unexpected by the world. But if NATO began to just start bombing the Kurds, that would be an outcry that they don't know how to resolve. So what better way than to stand back and let the Turkish government go in there and first consider the Kurds terrorists on their end and weed them out and open the door straight down to Damascus. And by the way, speaking of that, the other issue that we can deal with as well is the fact that Mumbai also is being played by the Turks like the staged coup. For what reason? That was so that, what could he do? What could Erdogan do then? Or the U.S. in this case here? Bring their French partners in. Also to bring more manpower in the region. So the French concoct this idea, oh, we're going to come help the Kurds. And the Kurds fell for it as well. You Kurds are falling for the same stupid tactic that Putin did. Putin believed that Turkey was his friend and ally. And now the Kurds think the Americans and the French are their allies. They don't care. They don't care. Just like in Geneva, they left you outside. I won't talk about Geneva. Not here, I won't. On Patreon, I did. So anyway, guys, this is where it's at. And this is what's happening. And I think we're at the door now. We're at the door of what that little boy Nathan said. There's going to be a war, and it's coming. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think we're very close. And when I say very close, that could still be a few months out, could be 6 months out. You got to remember, they got to replot the course, but everything's in place there. They may use another failed chemical attack, staged chemical attack to justify it and to move it forward. We'll have to see. I'm Stephen Benin. You're watching Israeli News Live. Blessings for you that are watching tonight. Don't forget to give thumbs up to the video, especially once it becomes on the on YouTube itself. Let's get this thing to go viral. People need to know the truth, and unfortunately, there's not many people willing to tell you the truth. And I think right now, they're really out trying to use the media, mainstream media. And Russia's the same. Russia's not different. They all try to win public opinion because they have to have the support of the public to do what they want to do. I'm against all the war. Period. I'm against it. Why should we keep dying for this nonsense over here in the Middle East? You know, if NATO would leave Syria, the war would end in a matter of a week. That quick. All you got to do is quit paying all these guys to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. What did the guy do? What did he do? 2011, he was willing to make a deal with Israel. Watching Israeli News Live. Thank you for watching, guys. God bless you. We love you. Shalom.